حاضر يا ماما.
ايوه صورت لك الورق.
ايه حيوان؟ احترم نفسك.
Good morning everyone. Today, we would like to present a report by Team Makadiyos in BSN Level 1 Section C. Let's begin. Our topic is very interesting, which is Anti-Sexual Harassment Act of 1995. Sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is unwelcome sexual behavior that's offensive, intimidating, and humiliating. It can be possibly written, verbal, or physical, and can happen in person or online. Anybody can experience sexual harassment, regardless of their gender and age. Like for example, nag-a-apply ka ng trabaho and yung nag-i-interview sa'yo ay tinanong ka kung gusto mo bang makapasok sa trabahong ito. Kung ganun ay dapat may mangyayari sa atin. Hindi ba may pagkakataong ganun ang nangyayari kapag ang kababaihan ay nag-a-apply ng trabaho? May pagkakataon din na kapag employed ka na at nagtangka ang boss mo na gumawa ng di kaaya-aya at bigla kang lumaban, maaring maapektuhan ng iyong trabaho gaya ng hindi pagkaka-promote at pagbaba ng sweldo. Always remember that sexual harassment is not only about sex. It is also about abuse of power of that person who have authority, influences with their employees and student, and even someone in your family. What are the forms of sexual harassment? Number 1 is physical. Letter A is malicious touching. Ito yung mga paghawak sa katawan mo na alam mong iba ang dating na kadalasan na nangyayari sa mga malalaking kumpanya. Letter B is overt sexual advances. Ito yung mga nagre-request o nagde-demand ng sexual favors like paghingi ng mga hubad na larawan. And letter C is gestures with lewd insinuation. It is same with letter B. And number 2 is verbal, such as not limited to requests or demands for sexual favors and lurid remarks. This harassment is using words that make the person being harassed uncomfortable. Number 3 is use of objects, pictures or graphics, letters or written notes with sexual underpinnings. Ito yung mga may involve such as picture or notes asking for something that will benefit them. And the number 4 is other forms analogous to the foregoing.
Sexual Harassment Act of 1995. Anti-sexual harassment are the value of every individual guarantee for human rights and to protect themselves from the dangerous workplaces. Sexual harassment should not be tolerated to the workplaces. People should be trained by the education of sexual harassment, otherwise law should be implemented for the safety of every individual who are being harassed. Section 2, Declaration of Policy. The state shall value the dignity of every individual, enhance the development of its human resources, guarantee full respect for human rights, and uphold the dignity of workers, employees, applicants for employment, students, or those undergoing training, instruction, or education. Towards this end, all forms of sexual harassment in the employment, education, or training environment are hereby declared unlawful. In this section, the dignity of every individual is very important. Sexual harassment declared unlawful to protect people who being harassed. So sexual harassment should be strictly prohibited in the workplaces for the peaceful of environmental.
Section 3, Work, Education, or Training Related. Sexual harassment defined. Work, education, or training-related sexual harassment is committed by an employer, employee, manager, supervisor, agent of the employer, teacher, instructor, professor, coach, trainer, or any other person who having authority, influence, or moral ascendancy over another in a work or training or education environment, demands, requests, or otherwise requires any sexual favor from the other, regardless of whether the demand, request, or requirement for submission is accepted by the object of said act. How is work-related sexual harassment committed? Work-related sexual harassment is committed when the sexual favor is made as a condition in the hiring or in the employment, re-employment, or continued employment of said individual, or in granting said individual favorable compensation, terms, conditions, promotions, or privilege, or refusal to grant the sexual favor results in limiting, segregating, or classifying the employee which in any way would discriminate, deprive, or diminish employment opportunities or otherwise adversely affect said employee. Section 4. Duty of the employer or head of office in a work-related education or training environment. It shall be the duty of the employer or the head of the work-related educational or training environment or institution to prevent or deter the commission of acts of sexual harassment and to provide the procedures for the resolution, settlement, or prosecution of acts of sexual harassment. Toward this end, the employer or head of office shall promulgate and appropriate rules and regulations and consultation with and jointly approved by the employees or students or trainees through their duty designated representative. Said rules and regulations shall prescribe the procedures for the investigation of sexual harassment and cases in the administrative sanctions thereof.
Section 5. Liability of the employer, head of office, educational or training institution. The employer or head of office, educational or training institution shall be solidarily liable for damages arising from the acts of sexual harassment committed in the employment, education or training environment if the employer or head of office, educational or training institution is informed of such acts by the offended party and no immediate action is taken. Create a committee or decorum and investigation of cases on sexual harassment. The committee shall conduct meetings or as the case may be with offers and employees, teachers, instructors, professors, coaches, trainers, and students or trainees to increase understanding and prevent incidents of sexual harassment. It shall also conduct the investigation or alleged cause constituting sexual harassment. Section 6. Independent action for damages. Nothing in this act shall preclude the victim of work, education, or training-related sexual harassment from instituting a separate and independent action for damages and other affirmative relief. The employer or head of office, educational or training institution will be held liable for damages arising from acts of sexual harassment if they are informed by the offended party of the occurrence of such acts. Yet no action has been undertaken. Can an offended party seek redress by taking independent action? Yes. The offended party may take independent action for damages incurred in the act of sexual harassment. She or he may also avail of relief.
Section 7 of the Republic Act number 7877 is about penalties. When we say penalties, it is the consequences of those persons who violates the acts and those persons who do bad things towards others. In this act, penalties, it is any person who violates the provision of this act shall upon conviction be penalized by imprisonment of not less than 1 month nor more than 6 months, or a fine of not less than 10,000 pesos nor more than 20,000 pesos, or it can be both, such fine and imprisonment at discretion of the law. Along with the employment-related consequences, the victims of harassment frequently suffer harassment-related psychological injuries as well, including depression, anxiety, headaches, lowered self-esteem, sleep disorders, weight loss or gain, and sexual dysfunction. Republic Act No. 7877 or the Anti-Sexual Harassment Law is considered as a milestone in the continuous struggle for the elimination of gender-based violence and crimes. The law's very limited definition of what constitutes sexual harassment leaves most women no recourse than to keep their silence. Imagine even the paltry penalty of imprisonment for 1 month to 6 months is enough to discourage a woman from filing a complaint. So always remember that any action arising from the violation of the provision of this act shall prescribe in 3 years. So that's what happened when a victim suffers from the sexual harassment. Section number 8, the separability clause. If any portion or provision of this act is declared void and unconstitutional, the remaining portions or provisions hereof shall not be affected by such declaration. As simple as this. Should any provision of this act or any part thereof be declared invalid, the other provisions, insofar as they are separable from the invalid ones, shall remain in full force and effect.
Section 9 Repealing Clause. All laws, decrees, orders, rules, and regulations, other issuances, or parts thereof inconsistent with the provisions of this act are hereby repealed or modified accordingly. Meaning to say that there should not be any inconsistency when it comes to provision of the evidences in order to win this act, or it will be repealed or modified accordingly as it is stated. Section 10 Effectivity Clause. This act shall take effect 15 days after its complete publication in at least 2 national newspapers of general circulation. Magiging ganap na may epekto na siya kung sakali man na meron ng 2 newspaper publication at hihintayin muna ng kinauukulan after 15 days.